Buenos que puedes enloquecer, quizá, tal vez, te pueda echar otros seis, comiendo con mi abuelita. Come como échale, compadre.
Okay, this is probably a good place to start. Hello, folks. I'm gonna go ahead and hand it over to Jasmine, or I don't know if you go by Yasmin or Jasmine, to do our language justice piece.
Thank you, Jordan. Both or either is fine. Thanks for asking. Hi, everyone. So I'm here on behalf of the CLC. I am here as a part of our practice of creating a space of language justice. This just means, as I'm sure all of you are familiar by now, that we want spaces where folks can participate in the language of their hearts. And so to do this, we're going to be activating the simultaneous interpretation function for this meeting. So as soon as we finish these instructions, we'll go ahead and turn that on. At that point, if you're joining us from a computer, you will see a globe pop up at the bottom of your screen that says interpretation. If you are joining us from a cell phone or a tablet, you will find this option on the menu with the three dots that says more. Either way, it's the same. If you're not fully bilingual in English and Spanish, we ask that you please select your preferred language to engage in. I ask that y'all please take your time with your words, just really, I know folks can get excited, but if you could really be aware of that, that'd be greatly appreciated. If you're having any issues with the interpretation or need anything at any point, you can always send me a message via the chat, and I will be happy to help that way. I am not sure if any of our Spanish-speaking folks are here yet, but I'm happy to give the instructions in Spanish now. Jordan, maybe, yeah, okay. Hola, buenas tardes. Mi nombre es Yasmín. De nuevo, estoy aquí de parte de la CLC para practicar algo que llamamos justicia del lenguaje. La justicia del lenguaje es una práctica en donde creamos espacios para que la gente pueda participar y interactuar en el idioma de su corazón. Para hacer esto, vamos a activar la función de interpretación simultánea, que la vamos a encender en cuanto terminemos de dar instrucciones. En ese momento van a ver un globo en la parte inferior de la pantalla que dice interpretación. Eso es si nos acompañan desde una computadora. Si nos acompañan desde una tableta o un celular, esta opción se encuentra en el menú con los tres puntitos que dice More o que dice Más. Igual es lo mismo, si no son completamente bilingües en inglés y en español, por favor elijan ese idioma preferido. Les pido que tengan en mente su velocidad, tomen su tiempo con sus palabras y si se les ofrece cualquier cosa me pueden mandar mensaje por el chat y ahí con mucho gusto les ayudo. Creo que ya es todo, ya podemos comenzar. Right, we can go ahead and get started. Thank you.
Okay, and we'll just make sure that both channels work real fast. Great. And on the Spanish or on the English channel also. Great. And a special shout out to Rebecca, who's recording in Spanish so that we can share this recording to folks who have registered but might not be able to be here just yet. And I'll do a quick introduction. My name is Jordan Garcia. I use he and his pronouns, and I work at the American Friends Service Committee. And this is the spotlight on No Pride in Detention. And we're very happy to have you all here. I would love for folks to go ahead and put in the chat your name, your pronoun, and let's do something you're proud of. Oh, I think that's a good one. I just thought of that on the spot. So something you're proud of, if you could put that in the chat, it'd be great to see who's here and who's coming in. And I'm going to go ahead and get us started. This is being recorded, just so you all know. Okay. All right. So today we're going to examine the reasons that LGBTQ people migrate. the dangers that they face in ICE detention, with a specific call to action for Paul White, who is in our Aurora Detention Center, and for his fight for freedom from that center. And he's going to join us towards the end of the call today. And I can give you a link to his toolkit so that you can learn more about his case. And I'm going to just make this a little smaller so I can see your faces at the same time I'm looking at things. Oh, I love what people are writing in the chat. Thank you, Dana. All right, I'm going to start us off with a quote. And this is actually a quote from Borealis, which is a fund that I admire very much. And it goes like this. From an intersectional perspective, immigration is a critical issue in the fight for queer and trans liberation. We recognize that the bold, visionary, and intersectional leadership of Black and Brown, trans, gender nonconforming, and disabled agitators and activists not only defines movement spaces, but it pushes them to be more inclusive. We strive to shift our individual and institutional behaviors to advance all LGBTQ plus folks, centering the voices, the experiences, and leadership of those most impacted by injustice. So I'm going to go ahead and put it in the chat because it's such a great quote, and it speaks to me. So there you go. Okay. All right. So there is no way to be completely exhaustive in this process of looking at the intersection of LGBT immigration. We are going to focus a little bit more on detention and a little bit more on a specific case. There are so many different kind of elements and components to this intersection that we just don't have time to go into everything, but we really hope to cover kind of the basics and then have a compelling call to action and a way to make a difference. So first, we're going to talk about the reasons that people flee their home countries, the reason that people come to the United States. So many lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender individuals often seek asylum or migrate to the West because they are facing exceedingly harsh penalties simply for being LGBT in their own countries. So, for example, in Uganda, there are same-sex relationships against the law and that are punishable with a lifetime prison sentence. People risk violence and extrajudicial and vigilante-style death. In Iran, homosexuality is legally punishable by death, and gays are targeted for honor killing. In fact, an honor killing of a gay man by family members hit headlines last year. In Chechnya, authorities have taken it upon themselves to purge the country of queer people. The government there is aiding a violent campaign to kidnap, interrogate, and expose homosexuals. I don't use that word, but LGBT people, and it's been underway since 2017. In Jamaica, colonial era anti-buggery laws are fueling hate and violence towards gays in wider society. And of course, the Taliban continue to threaten the lives of LGBT people in Afghanistan. So all of this is pretty gloomy stuff, but it is why people migrate. People are in the process of trying to save their own lives, and that's a pretty actually courageous act. So a trans person is murdered every 3 days in the world, with the majority of these murders occurring in Latin America. That's an older statistic, so it actually may be different now, but that violence is a motivating factor for many Latinx trans immigrants to immigrate to the United States. So while some individuals may be in detention due to seeking asylum, that's not the case for all trans immigrants who end up in detention proceedings, detention or deportation proceedings. There are transgender immigrants who've grown up in the United States with their families and either came to the United States without lawful status or they lost their status, and then that leaves them undocumented. And it's unclear how many trans immigrants have actually experienced detention proceedings in the United States because the Department of Homeland Security does not consistently record gender identity. So that's important to know too. LGBT immigrants in the United States encounter unique obstacles to securing protection and safety, particularly when caught up in the ICE enforcement and detention system. But it is recorded. We have a report to this effect that 1 in 4 substantiated incidents of sexual assault in immigration detention involved a transgender individual. And furthermore, LGBT immigrants who are pursuing claims to protection that are related to their sexual orientation or their gender identity will face discriminatory attitudes in the immigration court system, and it can lead to denials of their immigration protection and to longer periods of detention. So LGBT folks end up in detention longer than almost any other group of people. So there's many abuses in our immigration detention system. They can include denial of medical and mental health treatment, sexual assault, harassment by personnel and officers, arbitrary long-term solitary confinement, which is supposedly for the inmates' own protection. And LGBTQ individuals are 15 times more likely to experience sexual assault than their heterosexual and cisgender counterparts. So transgender folks, 1 in 4, LGBT folks generally 1 in 15. Something that I feel like is important to add in here too is that there are many people who are living with HIV and have had their health status exposed inside detention centers by officers or by staff members. And in particular, we've seen a lot of deaths related to HIV medications being withheld. So, and some of you may be thinking like, what are we doing about this? What is recourse that people can have? So detainees that are experiencing mistreatment while in ICE custody, they do have some forms of recourse. They can file a complaint about the abuse. I'm looking at some of you who probably are thinking about this. But if you are being abused or harassed or discriminated as a detainee, even though you can report that, many of the people we talk to feel unsafe reporting their mistreatment directly to staff because the conduct at issue is being perpetrated by those staff members. So on a typical night, about 75 transgender prisoners are being detained by ICE. And these detainees are often the most vulnerable to sexual assault by guards or personnel. They can be denied hormones and other medications. Let's see, I'm seeing here that several United States circuit courts have determined that denial of hormones is a violation of the 8th Amendment, requirement that those incarcerated receive adequate medical care. And yet, without advocacy from the outside, every single transgender person that I've come into contact with has been denied hormone replacement therapy. So for those of you who may not know a ton about hormone replacement therapy, blood clots is a really big side effect of having your estrogen medication interrupted. So it can be deadly. Okay, so some progress occurred during the administration of President Barack Obama in the form of a memo about how to treat transgender immigrant detainees. It was a set of policies that had already been released in ICE's 2011 detention standards. However, these policies were voluntary, and they did not include enforcement provisions. Among other things, the Obama administration's memo explained how to determine gender identity and asked that immigrants be housed in facilities appropriate to their gender identities. However, what we know to be reported to us is that transgender women continue to be housed in male facilities and transgender men continue to be housed in the female facilities. In the United States, there are two places where transgender folks are housed separately, and they're called transgender hubs in the system. One is in Tacoma, Washington, and the other is here in Aurora, Colorado. So that's important to know. That does not mean that everyone who is transgender ends up in one of those two places. It's just that they are considered hubs, and we've taken interest in the Aurora detention facility and have worked really hard to make sure that transgender appropriate medical care is offered in our facility in Aurora. Okay. So there's a couple of things that people might be wondering about withholding of removal and asylum seeking. So a lot of people who are LGBT come to the United States seeking asylum. And then if they are not able to get asylum or seek asylum in a certain way, they can also apply for what's called withholding of removal. Withholding of removal is granted by an immigration judge in cases where the applicant can show that there's more of a 50% chance of persecution in his or her home country due to race, religion, nationality, membership in a particular social group, or political opinion. It's similar to asylum in that it protects someone from deportation if they fear persecution, but it carries some other important distinctions. In fact, unlike asylum, you do not have to apply within 1 year of entering the United States, but there are certain crimes that will disqualify you from asylum, and they may also disqualify you from withholding of removal. Okay. There's another option, which is if you are ineligible for both asylum and withholding of removal, you can possibly get relief under the Convention Against Torture Act. And that's for those who've been sentenced to 5 or more years of total imprisonment due to some certain crimes. And those who qualify for relief under that Convention Against Torture are typically required to remain in mandatory detention during the whole course of their removal proceedings. So that's a bunch of facts, and I appreciate you all kind of receiving some of those facts. But we want to say really clearly that we believe here at AFSC that detention actually deprives all people of their freedom, and it cuts them off from their support networks. Make sure we can get everybody in from the waiting room. There we go. We believe that detention impacts people, and it cuts them off from their support networks and deprives them of their freedom. But for LGBT people, the impact of detention can be especially devastating. That's because where LGBTQ folks are bullied and discriminated against additionally by staff and others inside the facility, and that's a re-traumatization for people who are fleeing persecution. As a result, there are many people who have no choice but to stay in the closet in order to stay safe, and that actually makes it harder for them to prove that they are LGBTQ as part of their asylum claim. And in fact, we've encountered this here at our detention facility. In Aurora, there's transgender women who prefer to stay closeted and not come out as transgender because they don't feel safe. And that has made it harder for them to seek asylum because in the asylum application process, they have to prove that they are like trans enough. It's a really difficult conundrum to be in. So I'm gonna drop a couple of names just because I think it's important. Victoria Arellano, Roxana Hernandez, and Johanna Medina are all transgender women, and actually all HIV positive transgender women who have died because of the inhumane treatment they faced during their stay in our country in detention centers. These women did not have to lose their lives. And our movement leaders remind us that alternatives to ICE detention for LGBT folks, such as supervised release or community placements, could have saved their lives. So that's a bunch of bad news, but I wanted to share with you all our good news. There is a very strong and vibrant, especially in the last couple of years, I would say the last 5 to 6 years, movement of LGBT immigrants themselves who are fighting for our brothers and sisters and friends in detention centers. And many of them were not asked. They did not ask to be part of this movement for justice, but have stepped gracefully into the role of fighting for what is right. And I want to share an example. There's a young transgender woman who I believe is 26 now. During the pandemic, when she was 23 years old, Kelly Gonzalez was at our detention center here in Aurora, and she met with key decision makers several times, including Congressman Jason Crow, to share her experience inside GEO during the pandemic. She shared that she was forced to use industrial pesticides to clean her area inside the detention center, and developed adverse reactions. Her gums bled, and she got bleeding ulcers on her face. And what we found out later, when we found the name of the pesticide, is that it was a pesticide that was intended for use only in outdoor areas. It was like basically for like, it's an industrial pesticide. And she's not the only one who is forced to use this cleaning agent, forced to use this pesticide as a cleaning agent inside the GEO detention center, in all of the corridors and everywhere this particular chemical was being used. And so her stepping forward and to say that it was wrong protected everyone inside that detention center and got that chemical removed from rotation. So it's a pretty big deal that she took that upon herself and did that work. Her sister reached out to us, and we were able to get the harsh chemicals removed, and we got our meeting with Congressman Crow. And actually, every time I see Congressman Crow now, he asks me how she's doing. She has since been released from the GEO detention center, and she lives in LA with friends. Just an incredible woman. So that's a little bit about her. We have had many folks in our immigrant detention center in Aurora, and what we have observed from visitations with them and from staying in close contact with them is that they work really hard to keep each other safe. So that means they will accompany each other to appointments if they can, they'll walk with each other, they'll exercise together, and they take care of each other. They'll advocate for each other, and all of that is really important. Because ending up in the detention center kind of all at once on your own can be a really terrifying experience. And it's really, really impactful to me to see the ways that these folks are really looking out for each other and looking out not just for other LGBT folks inside the detention center, but looking out for young people and looking out for people who may be struggling with their mental health or having a really hard time. Sometimes transgender women will have like free time with women, and they will connect and they'll kind of share a little bit about what's going on in the different areas of the detention center. And because we have close contact with the transgender folks, they will encourage them, women and men and other parts of the facility, to reach out to us with their concerns. So we're going to hear more about some of those concerns in a little bit. But I also wanted to tell you about Geneset Gutierrez, who is a founding member of the La Familia Trans Queer Liberation Movement. She was invited last year to a pride ceremony at the White House, and she immediately declined. She didn't just say no, she called out the administration in an open letter, citing its inaction to help LGBTQ asylum seekers and migrants currently detained in ICE detention centers. These are her words. She said, "You could easily stop their suffering by instructing the Department of Homeland Security to implement a policy of liberating trans people, people living with HIV and other medical conditions, as well as other vulnerable people. There is only one solution to this problem, ending trans detention and using executive powers to protect LGBTQ people would have a greater impact on our community and would save many lives rather than hosting an event to deliver a well-crafted speech with broken promises." So she really handed it to him. But also she invited people to join her in several awareness raising actions across the country, and also to sign a petition when I can put it in the chat in a little bit, and join her in that demand. Okay, so a couple more things about that is Under Biden's watch, we've seen trans detention is still happening. And this year alone, not because of Biden, but 200 anti-trans and anti-queer bills have been introduced at the state and federal level with no end in sight, but with very little adequate pushback from the administration. And over 2 million deportations, the majority of those of that are Black Haitians and other people of color, LGBTQ people of color. So I want to share a couple of organizations that are doing this work that are really kind of part of this movement, part of this vibrant movement for liberation. One is the Queer Detainee Empowerment Project. They assist folks coming out of immigrant detention and securing wellness and educational, legal, and emotional support. And they work to organize around the structural barriers and the state violence that LGBTQ folks are experiencing. BAJI is the Black Alliance for Just Immigration, and they believe that a thriving multiracial democracy requires racial, social, and economic justice for all. BLMP is the Black LGBTQ Migrant Project, and they mobilize their people through community building, political education, and creating access to direct services. And then I wanted to share just on the very local level, we do here have a group, a small group of people and a support fund for our detention, for folks in our detention center here. So some of you out there in the crowd are part of this group, but we do have a Colorado Trans and Queer Immigrant Support Fund, and it offers aid to folks who are inside the detention center and who are recently released from detention as they make their way to their final destination. Oh, here comes one up. And I think it's important to mention because a lot of folks who are here at our immigrant detention center will leave the facility and they don't necessarily, well first, while they're in our geo detention facility, they don't necessarily have family who can send them money or put money in their commissary or have money on their tablet so they can make phone calls and things like that. So this fund is designed to support them so that they can have those resources. It's a very easy and simple fund. It's a GoFundMe. The money comes out, it goes directly into the detention center, and that's how it works. So also, when people leave this detention center, our detention center, we like to be able to give them a backpack. So we work really closely with Casa de Paz to put makeup and gender affirming supplies into that backpack. And we like to cover things like a cell phone if we can. Identity affirming essentials, a gender appropriate clothing and shoes. And then we also like to give each person who is released from the detention center, each LGBT person, a small amount of cash so that they can have a little bit of independence and a little bit of security. Great. So that is from the macro to the micro, to our local kind of efforts. I want to see if anyone has any questions about LGBT causes of migration. And in fact, I just received this really good action alert today for LGBT folks in Kenya. I'm going to put that in the chat real fast. Does anybody have any questions so far? Feel free to put any questions in the chat if you have any questions in the chat. Oh, and for those of you who are new and might not have introduced yourself in the chat yet, we're asking people to put your name, your pronouns, and something that you are proud of in the chat. It's nice to see what people are putting in there. And this is the action alert for folks in Kenya. So this is an example of why people might migrate. So it says LGBTQ folks in Kenya are under serious threat, and a simple action by the Biden administration could help protect them. Kenyan members of parliament are debating a family protection bill that calls for harsh criminal penalties for anyone identifying as LGBTQ or anyone who promotes or protects LGBTQ human rights. And this was actually sent also by some of our AFSC staff in Kenya who wanted to see this particular action be spread around, this particular call to action. Okay, does anyone have any questions about people being detained, LGBT folks detained? I kind of went through some of those facts quickly. Okay, and when I send the follow-up email with the recording of this, I'll attach the reports. Okay. All right. Now, does anyone have any questions about some of these organizations? I'm about to see if Uche, I believe Uche is on the phone, and I'm about to introduce him in a moment. Does anyone have any questions about the organizations I shared? Okay. So Uche is a new friend who I've been working with closely to build some support for Paul White, who we're going to learn about a little bit more about now. But Uche works for the Black Alliance for Just Immigration. And I'm just going to read a little bit more about them. African-American and Black immigrants are stronger together, and we can win by becoming leaders in the fight against structural racism and systemic discrimination. Baji was formed to bring Black voices together to advocate for equality and justice in our laws and communities. I'm going to introduce Uche and take this call from Paul. Uche, are you there on the phone? Can you unmute yourself? Okay, he said that he was gonna maybe be a little bit late. He's stuck in traffic, so maybe that's not him on the 202 number. But I did just get Paul on the phone. Paul, is that you? Hi, Paul. It's nice to see you, or nice to hear your voice.
Yeah. And I was seeing what was going back and forth. What time it's gonna start?
Yeah, so we did a quick overview of LGBT detention and all of that. And then I was going to talk a little bit about your case. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to keep you on the phone. I'm going to talk a little bit about your case. And then I'm going to turn it over to you to share whatever you'd like to share, okay?
Oh, give me one. I'm gonna hang up and recall this from a different phone. It's gonna be the same number, but my phone got much clearer. So just answer the phone when I'll call you. Hang up and call you right back.
Okay, that sounds great. Okay, folks, Paul is calling from the Geo Detention Center, and he's going to call back from a clearer phone. But I'm going to give you a little bit of background on his case. Okay, so let's see, let me find what I wanted to share with you. So Paul White is a bisexual migrant and loving father who's lived in the United States for over 20 years. He entered the country when he was about 18 years old and has been a lawful permanent resident with a green card for the entirety of his adult life. He's an entrepreneur with a passion for cooking. His dream is to open a food truck that serves his cultural cuisine. But right now, Paul is facing deportation to his home country, where he fears torture and death because of his sexual orientation. I'm just going to answer this phone real fast.
A free call from a detainee at Aurora ICE Processing Center. This call is subject to recording and monitoring. Press 1 to accept the call. to deny this.
Okay. So I make that.
Thank you for using sounding.
Oh, and now we have Uche who has joined us. Uche, it's nice to see you or see you virtually. I was sharing a little bit about Paul's case, and he's on the phone with us now. Okay, so I'm going to continue to share a little bit about Paul's case. So he is facing deportation. He is in our detention. He was transferred in March of this year, just a few months ago. He was transferred to our Geo Aurora detention facility. He is putting together a right for his habeas corpus, but his time in detention has been especially difficult given his chronic health concerns, which include type 2 diabetes, hypertension, depression, and anxiety. But his teenage daughter, who is a US citizen, has been struggling without him and recently celebrated another birthday without her father. If Paul were to be deported, they would be separated. He has many friends and family and communities that love him across the United States and support him in his fight for freedom. So he has been infected with COVID-19 twice at detention centers and has been a victim of excessive use of force from officers at several facilities. And we think it's just really important to share that he has been a leader inside the detention center and calling for fair treatment, better conditions, and for the resources that were promised. And we think it's just an incredible gift to have him here with us this evening by phone because he's been such an incredible leader, and we have a lot to learn from him and from his experiences. I'm going to give Uche just another minute to chill. And then after we hear from Paul a little bit, Alejandra, maybe I'll ask and see if you want to share anything about what it's been like for you to visit with Paul. Okay. Paul, would you like to share with us a little bit about what you're experiencing in the detention center right now?
Yeah, first I would say for food, we've been in extreme heat because the air conditioning in my pod was working, and it took them basically 2 weeks to fix it. It just got fixed a few hours ago. And no matter what we do, is like they get us, is like lock us in the cell. And one key note is all the cells are made of steel, metal. So it's like the temperature is hot outside, there's no AC, and the steel holds all the heat. And I have sleepless nights. Last night I couldn't even sleep, and I played sleeping bed because how hot the whole part where we're in. And a few days ago, we were planning on doing a peaceful protest, and while I was talking to the unit manager, he basically looked at me and threatened me, let me know, like, you know what's going to happen if I do anything. Basically, what we was going to do is just go on a hunger strike just so they could hurry and fix it. But they already singled me out because I was vocal about the whole thing and threatened to charge me with inciting the riot, which would lead to segregation. And those are the little tactics they do. Is like when they give us garbage food and we stand up and speak, is like they look at me as the bad apple. And medical, let me give you, so 2 weeks ago I had it was 2 weeks or 3 weeks ago I had an injury to my elbow, and I went to the medical because I thought my bone was broken. And the nurse that did the assist, he looked at me and said, "Oh, I don't think nothing is wrong with you." So I said, "I'm in pain. Can I get some pain medication?" He looked at me and told me, "No, I need to go buy it off myself." And that's when I get vocal with him and was like, who the hell you think you're talking to? I was like, I've been saying to you telling me to go buy pain meds off commissary. I said, what kind of shit is this? He walked away, refused, didn't give me anything. Luckily, the officer was a nice officer. She had me stay medical until ship changed to get another nurse. But they just give bare minimum. It's like, she gave me the medication, tell me I got to put in a request to the doctor. I put in a request to the doctor, they denied me. Another thing, last week, Friday and Saturday, I had a mental breakdown. So I asked to speak to mental health. They denied me. Nobody came and speak to me. Nobody do nothing. It's like the medical neglect that they do to us here is like, it's terrible wrong, and all because we immigrants is like we doesn't deserve proper care. I need dental care. They're telling me that they're not going to give it to me because I have to be here for 6 months. Even when I tell them, as long as I'm detained by ICE for over 6 months, you can't deny me. They still deny me. So these are the things that we as detainees go through here is like, whenever you fight back, they tend to target you and make you the bad person. And it's really heartbroken how they treat us less, they dehumanize us, patronize us, and like we're nobody.
Paul, thank you for sharing what you're sharing. It's very angering to hear you share the conditions that you're dealing with. I'm just going to go over some of them for folks just in case they didn't hear you quite as well. But
One second.
okay.
So, last week we got a meal. It was noodles, no meat, no nothing. So we asked, what kind of meal is this? It's not on the menu, never been served. You know what they told us? It's called butter pasta. So they just cook up some noodles, plain noodles, just add some butter to it and say that's the food. And that's what we were given.
Yeah, I was just gonna share with people that a lot of folks who are inside the detention center, because the caloric, the calories that they're supposed to get inside the detention center is not enough for an adult person, that they will supplement what the food that's provided with what they can get from commissary. And commissary food is also not that good. It's like ramen or cup of noodles or something like that. It might get you through the night, but it's not healthy food. And we've had folks who have been inside the detention center for long periods of time who will actually develop type 2 diabetes because of all the carbohydrates and the lack of protein and fresh vegetables. So, yeah.
And just to mention, like a ramen noodle is $1.30.
Yeah.
Just for a single ramen noodle, like they overcharge us for everything in here.
Yeah.
They need to.
You have 1 minute remaining for this call.
Paul, you can call me back too, but could you say something real quick about how many medical professionals are really there on site at any given time?
Repeat that question?
What is the medical staffing like?
They have people here, but they are lazy. And they don't want to do their job. This is an example. If you have a headache and the nurse comes to give her a pill and you ask for a simple Tylenol, they're going to tell you you have to put in a request to get a single Tylenol. That means you have to wait till the following day just to get a painkiller, which your headache is now, is not tomorrow. And they they have the staff, but they just don't want to do their job. They're just lazy and neglectful.
Yeah, we've heard that they're
You have exceeded the allowable time for this
well,
call.
okay, so
Bye.
Paul will have to call me back, but what we understand is that medical professionals are only there for very short periods of time. So they may be there for like a 4-hour stint in the afternoon, and then they're just not there in the evenings or in the mornings. You know, that's just not an acceptable way for to provide adequate healthcare for people. I want to learn more about what the situation is for the medical professionals, because we've also had many of our folks say that like they're dealing with severe anxiety, depression, suicidal ideation, and that they are not able to see a medical professional even after repeated requests to see medical mental health professionals, and that's unacceptable also. So maybe Uche, can I turn it over to you to share a little bit about the work that you're doing while I take Paul's call?
Yeah, thanks Jordan for helping to organize this, and thanks everyone for the opportunity to be here with you all. Apologies, I'm joining late, travel in New York. Yeah, already you guys have heard from Paul. His case has really been one of those very difficult case that I have really worked on. I've been working on this campaign since 2020. It's almost about 3 years. Next month is going to be 3 years that Paul got detained. He's been transferred from detention to detention facilities, from Caroline in Virginia to Farmville in Virginia, and some other detention, and now he's in Colorado. So he's been moved to multiple places, and he has developed some mental health illness while he's there, and he also have type 2 diabetes. Type 2 diabetes. He's also been a victim of verbal and physical abuse and attack from ICE officials, and also they've used a lot of racist comments or words on him, calling him names because of his identity as a Black person. There were times where one of the officers pinned him to the wall and threatened him, said that he should leave this country, he should go back to his country. So they've said all sort of horrible things to him. And a lot of that has also exacerbated his mental health. Paul has had a few suicidal attempts. The time I think it was last year, May, they wanted to deport him. We were able to, with the support of community, to stop the deportation. And then they moved him to another facility. And when they took him back to the same facility, the news about his sexual orientation as a bisexual man already gone viral at the facility, and other inmates now started discriminating against him. Nobody wanted to have anything, talk with him. Also, the time news about his sexual orientation also went out in his country of origin, and he got threatening messages from people, from his country, saying that he better not come back to this country, that because they're going to kill him if he come back. So ICE have denied all the requests to release him. We're not giving up. We are continuing to fight until we see that Paul is released. Black people in this country, Black migrants most times in this country, face more abuse in ICE detention. And a lot of the times, we don't really hear the stories and experiences of Black migrants. We saw what happened during the Asian, Asian migrant trying to come through the border, how they were being treated, and all, expelled back to their country. And we have seen thousands of Ukrainians and Afghanistans being welcomed into the country. So that tells us how the system works, that it always works in favor of, some people, but it doesn't work in favor of other, people that looks like me and Paul. Myself being a Black gay man from Nigeria, fleeing persecution because of my, an abuse, because of my sexuality, coming into this country with the hope of finding safety, having to go through the horrible, and injustice system of immigration detention for about 3 months and being denied medical attention, like all the things that Paul was sharing. Lack of medical attention, no good food, no good water, and being treated like an animal. Like even when you are sick, you're being chained to a hospital bed, you're being shackled and dragged and taken into a hospital. And while you're in a hospital bed, that was in my own case, I was chained to a hospital bed, unable to even move around or move my body. And you have officers, police officers watching you as though. So that actually have led me to, the work that I'm continuing to do around immigration, but also as to the reason I've been doing this work for years, even while I was in Nigeria. And what led to that was me losing my best friend at the age of 15 years because he was perceived to be effeminate and he was raped by 4 men at the age of 15. And a few months after he was raped, he found out that he got HIV and ended up committing suicide. And me witnessing some of my friends, one of my very good friend, a trans woman, was killed in her apartment and her head was cut off. They buried her body in a shallow grave in her apartment and put her head in a sack bag. My other friend and colleague that I used to work with was murdered and stabbed multiple times in his apartment, and his body was found 4 days after he's been killed. His body was already decomposed. And then me personally experiencing physical abuse and persecution, where I was dragged out and beaten on the streets naked and publicly disgraced because of my sexuality and the work I do. For those who don't know, Nigeria has a law that criminalizes the LGBTQ people and posts 14 years prison terms to anyone that is identified to be a member of the community. Recently, the Uganda president just signed into a law that criminalizes the LGBTQ folks in Uganda and posts 20 years in prison and also death by death sentence. Ghana and Kenya is also considering passing a bill to criminalize the LGBTQ people. So, most African countries are now enacting laws and bills. And these are some of the reasons why LGBTQ folks are fleeing their home country. They simply want to just be able to live their life, but the system don't want them. So when people come here, they still have to go through this, horrible system. Paul has lived in the US for over 22 years. He has a teenage daughter who has been, without her father for the past 3 years. So with the work I'm doing now, continuing to work with, right now I'm working with Black Alliance for Just Immigration, which is an organization that advocates for the lives of Black migrants and African Americans. But before joining that organization, I worked with an organization in New York called the Queer Detainee Empowerment Project that advocates for LGBTQ immigrants in general, seeking asylum and those in immigration detention. So my work right now with Baji is to continue to strengthen and advocate, advocate for Black migrants specifically and of African Americans to get to have the services and the support that we need to be able to live and thrive in this country. So again, thanks everyone for being here and continuing to show support for Paul and all immigrants locked up in ICE detention. We're just celebrating Pride. We're just celebrating Pride. I mean, still in Pride Month, but that freedom or the notion of freedom is still far beyond the reach of LGBTQ immigrants that are still locked up in, behind bars, who simply just want to be free to live their queer life. So thanks, Jordan, again for the opportunity to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm wondering, maybe we could ask Paul, what sort of support would you like to have from people who are attending the Spotlight on tonight? We do have a call to action that Uche can tell us about in a moment, but is there anything, any kind of support that you're specifically requesting, Paul?
You have 1 minute remaining for this call.
I'm sorry, I didn't know Paul was on the phone. You should have called me, yo.
And calling elected official to assist me on getting a release. That's the most important thing. Because I'm trying detained is like, oh my God, a few minutes, I mean, a few hours ago, I was talking to one of my celly and I was telling him, man, again, it's like, I wish if I was a is I would be treated with so much love and just see how we treated like animals in here and they lock us up and don't even care about the stress they put on us and our families. Like, I just need that
Yeah.
You have exceeded the allowable time for this call.
So maybe Uche, could you tell us a little bit about the phone zap that's happening this week? We're calling for Paul's for relief for Paul.
Yeah, so this Friday on the 30th, we'll have a phone zap at 2 p.m. Eastern time. That should be 12 p.m. Colorado time. I think like 2 hours behind. So the goal of this phone zap is to continue to put pressure on ICE officials to release Paul. Yeah, so since Paul was transferred to Colorado, we haven't had the opportunity to have a phone zap where we're able to put pressure on his new DO, because right now he has a new DO, which he just got his information. So we'll be calling him on Friday. We'll also be targeting some Congress persons and also senators. So also I urge them to advocate for Paul's release, but also advocate for the conditions in detention. Right now, Paul was complaining about the facility being so hot, the AC is not working and things like of that nature. But we'll be calling his DO specifically demanding his release. So it will be at 2 p.m. again Eastern time, and there's not going to be registration. So the Zoom link will be free. Anybody could just join. So we're encouraging you, please, if you're able to join that phone zap. If you cannot join at 2 p.m., feel free to make call at your own time. We'll have a phone script that you can use. We'll have phone numbers of the target. We'll have emails as well that you could use. Very easy to make call. We'll be posting that information on Instagram, on Facebook, hopefully by tomorrow. So Jordan will be able to get those information to you all.
Yes, we will. So Paul, we're going to have a phone zap for you on Friday. Folks here are excited to attend. I'm seeing some private messages in the chat. People are going to be there. I don't want to put you on the spot, Noel, but we understand that the temperatures here in Colorado are going to get up to the high 90s this week. And if the air conditioner is broken where Paul is, that's going to be really, really uncomfortable.
No, they just got it fixed today. So.
They got it fixed today? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, that's good to know. So how many days were you without air conditioning, Paul?
2 weeks.
2 weeks. Wish you had told me sooner, but that's okay. So yeah, I think it's important for us to be aware that, the conditions inside the detention center fluctuate from time to time, but that it's really important that you guys are getting, what you need.
Yeah, and another thing I never get to tell you is like, it's like when I got here, they only was giving detainees 2 pants, 5 shirts, and they only do laundry once a week, and I literally have to come up my cell in just my long john bottom and demand, and I talk to the warden to demand to give us more clothes because I understand it's the bare minimum, but you only do laundry once a week, so the only thing we could have done is only 1 pant you could wash every week. So basically, technically, you're gonna keep on 1 pant for 7 days because you only can send 1 pant, and I literally single-handed by myself, road breathing. I have to stood up to them for them to change and give us 4 pants. That way, we could stay clean until they do their laundry. And a lot of I know they hate it because I know the rules and I know the laws, and when I fight with the policy that they're supposed to follow. So that was one of the biggest accomplishments I did since I got here, is to let them give us more clothes to keep everybody clean.
Yeah. With COVID-19, that's especially important that people are able to stay clean and to have clean and fresh clothes to wear. Yeah. I'm just gonna point it out here too, is that that the fact that you are fighting for what's right inside the detention center is a huge gift to humanity. So thank you for what you do to stand up for what's right. It's really important. I know it's mostly a thankless job.
Yeah. Couldn't do without you guys. It's without, because they know I have a support team outside. It's like sometimes they think twice before they will react or put me in check or something. So they know all of that. So it kind of work a little bit into my advantage for them not to retaliate in the manner they would normally do with other people. So I thank you all for that support that you've been given.
Absolutely. So just so folks know, there's a support team for Paul here. We meet every Friday afternoon. Alejandra has been joining me on those calls. Thank you, Alejandra. I'd love for you to share a little bit more about that after Paul takes off. But I also want to invite people to know that you can have a pen pal inside the detention center. We encourage that. Sometimes people don't always write back from the detention center, but having letters coming into the detention center is huge, is very important for morale. It helps keep the bad feelings away. And we are always welcome to donate to our fund, so that we can continue to put money on the commissary books for people and on their tablets. So each detainee inside the detention center has a tablet, and that's how they make phone calls and watch shows or listen to music. And so we try our best to keep Paul with some money on his books, and other folks inside the detention center who are LGBT. We try to make sure they have money on their books too. I'll put that link to that in the chat. Oh, thank you for doing that, Edith. Paul, is there any last words you want to share with us about your experience or anything? We really appreciate you making time for us tonight.
I'm not for sure experience about all the detention that I've been to. You know, I've been to a lot of detention facilities. Here is just my last one that I've been to. Like there was one in Arizona, I think it's called Core Civics, that I've been to. Is like I literally have to go on a hunger strike to get out there. The condition is very poor. It's like when it's rain, the self flood is the food is extremely garbage. I don't even give my dog the food that they give us there. And I remember when I was there and it rained, it was like a waterfall coming through the vent in my room, and you stuck there for the whole night because they don't do nothing, and then the following morning you have to literally bail the water out. Just they don't do nothing, and I know it, and they still haven't done nothing. They're still detaining people into that facility, which is the worst environment I've ever been in. It's unbelievable so much. It's like, oh my goodness, I can't really. I would have to start from the bottom to Caroline's facility in Virginia, where I began. Where when I got there, it's like I was subjected to hunger. It's like they were literally taking the spoon and a half a spoon of rice they will put in the plate. I lost 20 pounds in less than no time when I just got to that facility, and I have to fight real hard. It's like that's when an officer physically put their hands on me because I stand up to the kitchen and to an officer that was denying me better food, and it's so much. It's just criminal how they treat us, and they don't want us to fight. They expect us to just take it because we the one that.
You have 1 minute remaining for this call.
It's like I was wrong to come into the country illegally. I was like, you don't even know my status. Why you think everybody that comes to the country illegally? So she was like, yo, we deserve to be locked up. And I wrote her up. I think she ended up quit because of that. But the system is so xenophobia. It's ridiculous.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Paul, you have been tireless in your advocacy for many years, and hopefully we will see a day when you are released from detention and your freedom has been won. We are going to be busting our butts to try and advocate for you this coming Friday at the Phones app. We really want you to know that we're pulling for you out here and that you're not alone, and that your leadership is really valuable. So thank you for being here tonight.
The allowable time for this call.
Hopefully you heard my encouraging words towards the end there. I did want to see, Alejandro, since you had a chance to visit with Paul through Casa de Paz. I didn't know if you wanted to share a little bit about that. Only if you had it, if you felt like it, but
yeah, no worries. Can you hear me okay?
yes.
Okay. I'm at a Starbucks. I've been traveling, so I had to try to find a somewhat quiet space. So I probably a couple weeks ago, I went to go visit Paul at the detention center through what Jordan mentioned with Casa de Paz and the letter writing. And they also do visitations where you can go as a group with Greg Mortimer, who sort of organizes for us to go on Friday, Saturdays and Sundays. And you know, Paul mentioned this, but the way that these facilities are structured are really terrible. They're criminalizing, dehumanizing in every aspect, just from how you can't even come into close contact with people. These facilities are very prison-like, and it's a lot to go through, but to be there and share those moments with Paul and feel like an outlet for him is what's really important. and for him to have that outlet to talk about what he's experiencing, or to even talk about other things to get things off of his mind of where he's at. It was really powerful. So I strongly encourage, if you've done anything with Casa de Paz and in the past, you've always wanted to, do visitations, those are now open now that COVID restrictions have become less regulated. So yeah, reach out to me and I can put you in contact with Greg, or, if you want to go, I'm planning to go this Saturday. And we usually meet up about 9:30 in the morning. We're there, maybe for a few hours. And did you want me to also mention anything about the Free Paul campaign?
Sure, yeah.
So we've also, Jordan brought me on a couple weeks ago for the National Free Paul campaign, which, how long has it been running now? Do you know, Jordan?
About 2.5 years.
2.5 years, okay. And basically strategizing different sources of support, like organizing to get people to sign on, to know about what's happening with Paul's case, to advocate for his release, to advocate for any kinds of, harmful treatment that he's experiencing, to take that back, tell people who have different positions of power to hopefully do something about it. Yeah, I don't know if I'm forgetting anything, or if you want to add anything.
No, yeah, that's great. Yeah, if anyone's interested in joining the campaign, we meet on Fridays to try and do some strategy. He does have a legal strategy, which is unfortunately a complicated legal strategy. But also, if you're interested in just writing letters to him, we can provide you with his A number so that you can just send him a card or reach out. I can't emphasize enough that just dropping a card in the mail to someone who's inside the detention center is a really big deal for them. I know, Harriet, you've written lots of letters, and Rebecca, I'm sure many of you have. So if anyone else, Dane, I'm not sure if you have, but I can imagine your heart would love it. If anyone else wants to share about your experience connecting with someone inside the detention center, I'd be happy to hear it now before we wrap up. No pressure. Okay. Well, I will send some more details about the Phones app this coming Friday. It'll be at noon our time. Some of the folks from the Free Paul campaign are in California, and some folks are in New York. A lot of them are in New York. And so I was like, they were like, well, what's a good time for Coloradans to call? And I said, noon is good for us. So we're gonna have it at noon on Friday. And we'd love to have you, and please spread the word. Thanks so much for being here tonight. I'll just open up to see if anyone has any questions at all. Stephen, I don't know if you have any questions, or Noel, or whoever's on the phone. If anyone has any questions, I'd love to try and entertain them. Noel has not asked me this question, but I will answer it anyway. Congressman Crow's office is aware of Paul's situation. I've connected with Sean over there at his office to get a release of information squared away, but we are connected with that office, so that's positive. Okay, thanks so much everyone for being here. Another hats off to Yasmin, our interpreter. If you'd like to wave, or if everyone want to put themselves on camera and wave good night, we would love that. All right. There's Harriet. Okay, thanks so much everyone. Have a great evening and take care. Bye.